This is more correspondence with Simon Odell. Simon, thanks for taking the time to look at this again. And I want to stress that since this involves a paradigm shift, a serious paradigm shift in the understanding of what light is, that we have to reframe all of the observations in astronomy. In other words, we have to reconsider all of the concepts, all of the structures that we have sort of used our three-dimensional knowledge and the Doppler shift and parallax and these sorts of tricks to analyze and model the distances of the stars, what we believe is out there gravitationally. When you're talking about something like Antares and you're talking about hypertime shadows. These are things in astrotometry that are understood to be consequences of inconsistencies in things moving through time. In other words, when there's something moving through time in a nonlinear way. And so there is a structure, there's an organization. And I think that this is what the Kabbalah was on about the relationship between the energy forms. And you said that you compared the sunspot to a hole. It's actually a higher frequency. If you look at the X-ray image of a sunspot, it's very bright. It's actually the brightest part of the sun. And the reason that I say that it's that symptom, that higher frequency energy, is the connection through time. It breaks across the spatial barriers that a normal time-space moves through if it moves linearly. And so there's this part of a waveform that is the 0 point, and a single wavelength has 2 0 points in it. And so there's the connection between the dimensions is that phenomenon. And the way that light moves is not in a single waveform. We've broken out the electrical and the magnetic components, and we model it as a sort of orthogonal transverse wave with perpendicular electromagnetic component and electrical component. That's 2 dimensions, but there's actually 6. And I think Walter Russell had figured this out, and this is what I'm talking about in hypertime. And so when I was in high school, I came up with this idea that the photon wasn't a wave, but a standing wave. And so what I was modeling is that there's this movement back and forth that this other waveform underneath that creates the impression of the photon, that creates the persistence of that waveform. And my theory that this was actually from a concept that I came up with that is, basically I call it the know-nothingness principle, which was sort of a resurrection of this ancient notion, nature abhors a vacuum. But it's a philosophical position, as I see it. The concept that there could be a place where nothing exists is a contradiction, in my view. And so I was trying to resolve this contradiction that there's this space where there's nothing. Because if there's really nothing there, how could it take up any space? How could it take time to move through it? And so I got into this argument with my high school physics teacher. When I originally told him about my theory, he was really impressed with it. But then he quickly lost interest, and as he was teaching us about Newtonian mechanics, ironically, I was putting a foundation underneath of what Newton was saying. And I would ask him things, well, what is gravity? Well, we don't have an explanation for how gravity actually works. I came up with one. And I said, well, the last thing I asked him is, well, why does an object in motion remain in motion? Which is the, I think it's the first law, and that seems like a sort of really sort of simple concept that something that once you accelerate it, it continues in motion unless there's friction or something like that, and it's almost like it's a wave. It moves like a wave. And so the object itself is actually the standing wave. And the reason it takes a force to accelerate it is because the components of the underlying time space have to negotiate their positions with the rest of the universe whenever you put something in motion. And so there's this underlying mechanics that astrotometry provides that is at that level. Now, Russell didn't have these other discoveries. Russell was trying to shift the paradigm just based on all of the observations that his theory better explains. The photon spin entanglement in astrotometry is a simple phenomenon, because in order for that photon to exist in a single place, there has to be this waveform that's bouncing back and forth between where it is, where it's perceived, and where it's going to be. And so there's this built-in hypersymmetry. You have to integrate this concept that the chronocentric concept is tied into the concept of hypersymmetry. There's this supersymmetry, which we see on the subatomic level, that when folded out extends through time. There's this time-space extension on it. And you've got these forms that break through the time-space. And that's why we see the higher frequency energy. It appears to us as a black spot because that energy is moving right through us, most of it. And so that, that's the nature of an X-ray. The X-ray goes through rather than being absorbed. And so it implies a lot about what actually might be that space that appears empty and dark in the heavens. And so there's a resolution right there for dark matter and dark energy. An implication that the reason that it's not seen is because it's a component of us at a different time. And so that is some of, I hope that helps. I don't know if I've touched on all of the things that you brought up, but you have to sort of abandon all of the normal common sense notions about what things are from the perception of light, and use the underlying understanding that there's this wave mechanics that's going on underneath that moves us through time.